All right, welcome to the branding webinar. Our main goal in putting this together is just to help give you as teams more tools and resources and kind of our thoughts on what makes good branding in this space. So the reason that two of us are talking, I think Kelsey is pretty self-explanatory given her experience. For me, not a lot of people actually know is that I am a professional digital marketer and did major in this. And the reason that I actually came to esports was with COVID knocked that down to part-time. So I have been freelancing for the past few months and also worked full-time in this for 2 years before I started doing more of the casting stuff, which you all probably know me for. So yeah.
Yeah, and mostly I'm just applying my experience in terms of what I know LCS organizations are kind of looking for in terms of teams or in terms of players, and then just also brainstorming what makes good branding for teams because for sure no one in the LCS space has fully figured out the sponsorship take. So the trickle down effect is still kind of a work in progress, but it's a great conversation to have at every level.
Yeah, so our goal for the day is to give you a few instances. Wow, this is a good start. I went for the players one. Uh, it's actually going to be to give you a few tools that you can use, hopefully, to bring to your teams, and use that to help improve your brand and your take on branding moving forward.
Just talking about carving out a brand identity specific to managers and teams. This is a situation that's a little bit, it's not specifically unique to amateur, but in amateur it's more important just because of how heavy player turnover is. So situations where you can create a brand around a star player is probably not great for you, especially since a lot of the revenue models for teams in amateur are focused a lot on development fees. So the goal is to get your players to a higher level. Given that information, you really want to be thinking about what is a brand identity that you can have as an organization that is consistent with your goal as an organization, as well as something that you can have regardless of what players are on your team. So, what is something that players that you're interested in will latch onto? Also, what kind of brand identity do you have given your goal? I know that there are a lot of teams in the space that are focusing on maybe lower elo players. They just want to help give them a platform to get to Grandmaster, Challenger, those types of elos, and I think that that's great. You can still have a really solid brand if that's your goal. If your goal is to promote players to Academy and to kind of reap some of those development fees, your brand identity can be consistent with your goal. Your platform should be based on engaging not just the audience, but also the players on your team. If you have players on your team, regardless of who you're recruiting or who is currently in your roster, engaging with your brand, promoting some of the memes or some of the ideas that you're putting forth, that's really, really solid. That's something that you want to see. So really good brands kind of engage not just your players on your roster, but also the community that follows them so that you can create a level of consistency over and over again. Talking to Riot Games, there's over 50% turnover in the amateur space. And obviously at the higher level teams, you don't see as much of that turnover, but in general, probably a lot of individuals here can sort of reflect on, yeah, obviously there's a lot of variety in salaries and offerings within amateur teams. So turnover will be pretty high in most organizations. So focusing on a brand, focusing on the type of content you can create within restrictions is really important in creating an identity for your organization.
So a part of this, obviously, Twitter is a really big part about your brand, and we just wanted to give you, once again, a few tools that you may or may not have thought of beforehand that oftentimes we have seen other orgs use, or I myself have used with working with professional brands and how to execute on this. One really easy thing that I like to do, and I have told a lot of casters to do as well, is just word association. So what are words that you do want to be associated with? What are words that you don't want to be associated with? Something that you might see in a lot of the bigger teams or orgs is they'll have something called a branding book, in which case they outline their brand, what they want their brand to be, what the voice they want to use on social media, all that good stuff. That starts with word association. And so this is just having a list like this. The reason that it helps, it just helps give you more direction with your posts, right? Because it may not always be you running the social media account, but it's always going to be someone representing your brand, which stays the same, right? And so having these can sometimes help you outline things that you like or don't like. I only have the words here just kind of as examples. If you want to be toxic or arrogant, I think that Evil Geniuses, unironically, is actually a good example of that, right? With hashtag live evil. It's definitely something that they have made work for them, going with that angle as a brand. So brainstorming this with your team can be really helpful, and trying to give your posts a little bit more baseline or direction. Also, something that I personally really like to use and push in pretty much any single consulting thing I do, or with any social media feed I take over, is what I like to call content buckets. This is very much seen as a best practice within the space. The good part about content buckets is that if you go to schedule out your posts, this can really help you identify like what you want to schedule and where. And so these are 3 buckets that I think are pretty applicable, especially the first 2, to the majority of amateur teams. First off, being informational. You probably know when you're playing your matches. You may not know who exactly you're playing, but you can use social media tools to schedule these out in advance, and just make a post, right? Like, where can you watch us? Like, who are we playing and when, right? Another one that I really like, engagement. I think anything with video content, I think that's the biggest push that I would make for any amateur team. I think that if you are an amateur team in this space and you do any video content involving your players, that automatically gets you a step up on the rest of the teams competing in the space as well. And also just really powerful to have, and really helps not only your team brand themselves, but also the players as well. And building up the brands of the players can also help you too. Outside of that, promotion. Hey, is one of your players streaming? Did you guys just hit a milestone? Did you hit 2K followers on Twitter? Like, tweet about it. Celebrate that. Promote things that are good in your org, outside of just winning matches, right? I know 1 or 2 orgs may have merch. I thought Radiance did a nice job of actually pushing merch, if anyone was around last year. How just get your brand out there. And so kind of using these buckets, it can help you identify like what to post and when, and give you a little bit more balance on your feed. So like when you scroll through your feed, the goal is to make sure that like your brand, it feels like you have an identity and a little bit of focus. Sometimes that can get lost in feeds. All right, examples. We pulled a few examples. Some of them involve teams in the space, some don't. Just as a forewarning, if we use yours, we're not trying to be mean or anything. We're just trying to pull examples that are good, just to talk about. So first off, getting in, recently, just yesterday, we actually had something else on this slide, and we decided to swap it out. The Bethany Esports announcement video. This ended up getting a ton of traction. They're one of the first collegiate teams to do this. And if you didn't see it, we'll kind of run a little bit of the tape as I talk over it. But this was video content. It does a really good job of putting a face to the in-game names, right? The players. It leans into the collegiate brand, which I think is really powerful for them. And it's fun for these guys as well, right? They get to kind of represent themselves. There are some critiques that we have with the video overall, but we also really like the direction of it too. All the players and the managers got to feature themselves in a fun way. So we definitely like this and encourage other teams to do so moving forward.
And obviously, one thing I point out is that this is kind of high level investment, and not everyone here will have the ability to produce a video like this. So we'll have other examples that are not kind of as high investment, but video content can be very low effort too, right? If any of your players stream and you encourage them to stream, you can include that in a Twitter post. Mm-hmm. Things that are really good for engagement, that just like a snapshot of one of your players doing something cool on their stream can create a lot of engagement that you wouldn't expect to have. Just something very short like that, very interesting. Video content doesn't have to be high effort. It doesn't have to involve a lot of budget or polish. So,
yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we put on broadcast, you guys have seen what we do, right? A lot of it is not polished, and we definitely lean into the amateur angle too. So, feel free to do that as well for yourselves. Let's see. A bad example. Not to pick on Wildcard, but before Cup, this was the last time that they tweeted. And overall, like, there's not a lot of engagement tools. If you post a GIF or an image, you're always going to get more engagement on social media. Those percentages go up by about 50%. And so, having designed images like something like Maryville, that team is really good at, featuring a face of their players, the score of the match, the team they're playing up against. Once again, those are a little bit higher investment, like with templates of designers as well, but still really powerful for their brand. And so we want to see at least a little bit more effort, and we do have a good example of what we thought was pretty decent for a post-match. Definitely like the fact that they tagged all their players. They have a hashtag. That's great. I think a lot of the orgs here have hashtags, but tagging your players is great. Tagging the TOs is good too, because they might see this and retweet it to their own following. And some of the TOs have okay followings on Twitter. And it's also some extra information with the clip, right? So a little bit more context, which, I mean, this was a good play coming out from Barrage. Got them the win. And so we really like this. The reason that this example is in here is something that I always like to say is even large brands can fall short with their commitment to social. For Golden Guardians, like, yeah, they have the graphic, they have the template, that's great, but they aren't tagging any of their players, they aren't featuring them in the post as well, like their main LCS team does. Obviously, they invested really heavily into graphics. They're also not interacting with other brands. That is a really good opportunity for you. I thought that Barrage and Solafide, they like had this one post where Solafide like responded with Barrage responded with like a crumbly edited like sub sandwich that I'm sure that like Return did, and then Solafide like had like a great like banter back. Like, have fun. You see fast food brands interact with each other all the time on social media. Like, that is good. So feel free to engage with the other brand. Like, have some fun with the other team that you're going up against for the week. And keep things interesting. Give us more reasons to tune into the games. And for me as a caster too, you give me more things to talk about. So I always appreciate that as well.
Yep. And then if you guys remember the TL IMT interaction where Revenge solo killed Alfari and that they stayed good on their commitment, that's really low cost and extremely fun. Then, of course, you had something similar like Barrage and the McDonald's with APA. Like, all these, there are a bunch of interesting things at different levels that require like low levels of investment, but still create a cool brand identity that's fun for people to follow and interact. So.
Yeah, and the great part about this too is like it's all gaming, right? So like fun is the word that you've heard us say a lot. Things are supposed to be fun. It's not like you're in an industry where I've had to like work in like SaaS industries and I can't have any fun with social feeds, right? So this is definitely a place to like be creative. If it's a little like scuffed or not exactly like perfectly photoshopped, like that's okay. You can lean into that, and definitely something that's accepted in this community, which makes it the entry fee even lower to doing good content on social as well. Some specifics, just like post and advice. One, bottom right, like use emojis that fit your brand. Emojis can be a really powerful way to communicate things when you only are given 280 characters. And I think it's a fun way to represent something. So obviously Supernova, you have a couple of no-brainers, right? With like the rocket and the moon. I've seen them use that before. That's awesome. I encourage other orgs like Wildcard to find emojis that fit that brand too. Post-match posts, if you guys lose, that's okay. Update people about it. We just want to know like what happens, right? Also, player headshots, that's something that I really advocate for. Even if you can get your players to just like take a selfie of themselves like on a wall. I know that players like aren't always thrilled to show their face, but I think the one really tough part about gaming is the fact that like it's really hard to put a face to an IGN, especially an amateur. It's not like I can say Tiger Woods and everyone knows like what his face looks like, right? I think that if you as an org can help put a player's face to their IGN, I think it helps both parties and will help convince players to also maybe go with your org in the offseason, like moving forward, right? Just if you're able to feature them. Also, recruitment posts. I know that Kelsey, like, you have a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think the thing about recruitment posts is just be as clear about what you're looking for when you're recruiting a player as possible. So if you want a jungler with a specific level of elo or a specific amount of experience, then those players will know to apply. In general, just make sure that you're being as clear as possible to players with what you want. Also include, this is a bit of a stretch goal, but include like the type of brand that you have in your organization, like perks that you have for when players sign up with you. Maybe your perks include payment, or maybe your perks include we'll do video content, right, in every half year, something like that. and players will be interested in doing that to get their names out there, to get better brands. So recruitment posts like that, I think just being as clear as possible with what you want and then what you offer is very important, instead of just, we're looking for a jungler, apply below. Yeah.
Broadcasting. I know that not all the teams broadcast their own games. And this is definitely something where we want to kind of give you some tools and to potentially stream your games, because the number one thing that you can do for your brand, and unfortunately with the new Proving Grounds format, it is harder for the TOs to cover all the games, with given the fact that they were given a 2-week window to run these tournaments. So streaming your games becomes much more important. And we have some ideas that you guys can use for like low effort, just streaming a POV, or for higher effort if you want to get more invested as well. So first off, what you need to stream your games as a team. I'll have a link for everyone after this to access this slide deck in view mode, and so you guys can like use these links. But there's like some basic computer specs. We consulted with like our own production. We actually have a couple recommended builds as well that are different cost levels in case this is something that you are very interested in, as well as the software that's used for streaming and just a basic setup video that can get you started with a league stream. The entry cost to streaming minus the computer, it's actually very low in terms of specs, and definitely something that once again, the most powerful thing that you can do for your team is just to make sure that those games are broadcasted, right? If an awesome play happens, you want to be able to capture that and promote it on social media, right? And promote your team. Also coming from the broadcasting angle, if you want to get more invested and bring in a broadcast team, I know that XT's in here. He ran USB last year. That really helped pair casters with orgs, and I'm sure that a couple people in the call did use that. It's not around. We do have places that you can find talent, but you can get talent for relatively cheap in the amateur space. Being a caster who has casted for exposure bucks before, I do not recommend it. You will not be able to really control who casts for you, and I don't like setting a bad precedent for casters and producers, but it is an option. Also, keep in mind with all these rates that you will have to pay for a third person as well that can produce the games. There are people that do that too. For $20 a person, you'll be able to get a little bit more choice about who you want to take, and you might get to eliminate some of the beginner talent. I am all for beginner talent, getting exposure, but also it's your brand, right? So if you want to have certain casters, you can definitely request that. I know that some people in here have requested casters. That's great. If you have some of us you like to work with, that's fantastic. And if you're going to pay $50 plus a person to just cast a best of 3, you'll probably be able to get most of the talent that you see on the main broadcast too. So just trying to give you guys some price ranges for what it would take to actually put that together. And once again, keep in mind that this would be 3 people. We also have 3 Discords that you can post in if you want to find talent for a last-second gig, and these are the point of contacts. So feel free to join those Discords if you aren't already. There are some pretty decent casters that are up and coming in all of them. I know personally, getting started in casting, I also started in all these Discords as well. And so there are some people that have talent, and if there are casters that you don't think are great or don't enjoy, then you can always work with other people in the future too. You are the org, so you have control with who you work with. Third-party content. We made this more for players, but we also wanted to make this for the teams, just to encourage your players to do third-party content. It gives players a great chance to give exposure, and players are smart enough to shout out your team and their teammates at the end of whatever third-party content they're doing as well. So we just wanted to kind of throw this in there and have you encourage your players to take interviews, even the ones that aren't as thrilled about it, right up front. So yeah, I don't know if you have any more on this, Kelsey.
Yeah, I mean, you as organizations understand that this is an entertainment industry, I think more than a lot of the players that do. So for you, obviously, there's going to be more investment in getting your players to shout out your org, getting your players to bring more exposure to your org. So whatever leverage you have there, just kind of emphasize to them that this really matters. And definitely in the second half of the hour, we're going to be talking a lot more about how exposure can lead to better opportunities for players, so they can get an idea of that as well. But you have experience, you've been around for a little while as managers, as team owners. You really understand that the more visibility you have, the more likely a player is to get noticed, the more likely an organization is to get noticed. So encouraging your players as much as possible and driving home the idea that you do interviews, it helps us, it helps you, it helps everyone's platform. So I think generally whatever leverage you can use to help your players get involved with third party content and get your names out there is going to be beneficial.
We also have some basic interview tips that you can pass on to players. They'll see this as well. It's pretty simple. Just smile, be positive, be real. You can be honest. Players will do whatever they feel comfortable with as well. So just make sure that they're them. It's their chance to do that. That is wrapped for all the planned stuff that we had within the PowerPoint. We would love to open the floor up to any questions that you all have as team managers and owners. And whether that's specific to either of us. I'm sure that you want to pick Kelsey's brain a little bit more than mine. But yeah.
Yep. I mean, I think just whatever questions are available in chat, or if you guys want to talk to me afterwards, my DMs are usually open too. But I think in general, just the main purpose of this presentation was along the lines of basics that people weren't necessarily accomplishing. So if you have more advanced questions, like a lot of people here I know are already streaming their matches. They're already using socials at a competent level. So if you have more questions like why aren't we getting traction, what can we do a little bit better, then we'll do our best to answer those as well.
Yeah, this is just meant to give some basic tips. If you're already doing a lot of the things, that's fantastic. If you want to get into more advanced stuff, feel free to DM either of us if you have any questions, or we can help you with any of that as well.